¿Puede comprender lo que digo? ¿La educación bilingüe promueve la diversidad étnica o es un despilfarro de dinero?
The children leave the public schools not being able to read English or write English or even speak English properly, and that's a disaster.
If I had to think of having youngsters come into school and not be able to use their own language, I don't know how they would ever acquire the academic skills necessary.
In any language, Proposition 227 would spell the end of bilingual education in California public schools. Like Proposition 187, which sought to cut public services for most illegal immigrants, and Proposition 209, which dismantled affirmative action programs in public employment and university admissions, California's latest ballot initiative is sparking a national debate. The head of Univision, a leading Spanish language media company, is funding a TV campaign against 227.
Proposition 227 establishes a program to intensively teach children to read and write English as soon as they begin school.
President Clinton says no on 227.
Well, a Field Institute poll shows most California voters, 61%, favor eliminating bilingual education. However, that is fewer than the 71% that favored the bill last month. I know you'll forgive my rusty Spanish at the top of the segment there, but here to talk about this issue today are Ron Unz, chairman of English for the Children. He wrote Proposition 227. Also, Carlos Garcia, superintendent of the Fresno Unified School District. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Ron,
Thank you.
as we said, your name is on this initiative. Why do you think it's necessary?
Bilingual education was a well-intentioned program that began 20, 30 years ago, but it's been a complete and dismal failure. It doesn't work. A quarter of the children in California public schools today don't know English, and each year only 5 or 6% learn English. 95% of the children who start a given school year not knowing English have not learned it by the end of that school year, and that's failure in any language.
So how does it work?
Well, it doesn't work.
No. I mean, how does 227 work? In other words, if you have kids coming into the school system
Exactly.
who are limited in their English knowledge, how do they matriculate into the system? How do you do it?
It's a very simple idea. Our initiative would take those children who don't know English and put them in a short-term, intensive English language immersion program to teach them English as quickly as possible. Once they've learned enough English to be able to do regular schoolwork in English, they would be moved into the regular classes with all the other children. And for young children, 5 or 6 years old, it should only take them a few months or at most a year to learn enough English to be mainstreamed.
Now, if they don't learn as quickly as you think they're going to learn, is somebody going to stay with them?
Absolutely. If they don't learn English after 1 year, they can be kept in that program for a longer period of time. But most of these children, these young 5- and 6-year-old children, can learn English very, very quickly and easily.
Okay, what happens if you enter the school, the public school, in, say, the 10th grade?
Yeah. What our initiatives, what I personally believe is that when you're talking about older children, children who are 12 or 13 or 14, you can make a very reasonable case in favor of bilingual education, teaching children that age in their native language while they're learning English so they don't fall behind academically. Now, most immigrants I know don't agree with that. They think children even of that age should be taught English as quickly as possible, but at least it does make a plausible case. Our initiative makes it possible for parents of children of any age who want to place or keep their children in bilingual instruction to get a waiver to do so. But it's much easier for the parents of older children. If the child is 10 years or older, the parent simply has to go down to the school and meet with the principal and teachers and decide together whether the child would do better in a bilingual program or an English immersion program.
Carlos Garcia, you admit that the current bilingual system doesn't work, but you don't think this is the answer, do you?
Well, I admit that a portion of it doesn't work. I mean, Mr. Unz generalizes quite eloquently. The fact of the matter is that only 30% of all the children in California who are limited English proficient students are in bilingual programs. So what's the excuse for all the other kids who aren't in bilingual programs? Why aren't they far exceeding everybody else? I mean, the reality is that you can't paint everything with one brush. This one-size-fits-all approach is absurd. People learn language at different rates. There are some students that could master it in 1 year, but it's ridiculous to assume that most students will, especially what I'm talking about is academic language. You could learn oral language out in the playground, but to learn academic language so you could succeed in school, that'd be like asking Mr. Unz to go spend a year in China and by the end of that year be able to read all Chinese, be able to take tests in Chinese, and that just doesn't happen in the real world.
Let me gauge our audience here. Catherine, your thoughts?
Well, I see that the bilingual programs that we have as they exist today aren't working as well as they could. But I don't think that an English immersion program is the answer. I don't think that children who are coming from other countries are ready to be completely immersed in the English language. They're dealing with major culture shock, among many other factors. And I think the money and effort spent on creating an English immersion program could be spent creating a gradual change over from Spanish or whatever their native language is to English, and that would be much more effective.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I respond to that? There's a misconception that most of the children who don't know English in schools come from other countries. That's not the case. Over half of the children we're talking about are native-born Americans. In the Santa Barbara School District, 80% of the children in bilingual programs were born right in Santa Barbara. These are children who are born here. In many cases, they already speak some English when they start school, but they're placed in bilingual programs. And in California, bilingual education is a synonym for Spanish-only instruction. The children receive 30 minutes or an hour of English a day, and everything else is in Spanish. And that's one reason so few of them learn English. And by the way, Mr. Garcia had the figures wrong. Over half of all the children in public schools who don't know English are in native language programs. And for Latinos, it's closer to 60% are in native language programs where they're given a lot of Spanish or almost all Spanish during the day. And that's why they don't do well in school.
Well, I think that one of the things that we greatly differ on is that, you know, Mr. Unz assumes that bilingual programs are not to teaching English to students, and he's absolutely wrong. The number one priority, certainly in Fresno Unified School District, is that we know that every single child, the number one priority, has to master the English language. What we're trying to do is get them to master the language as quickly as possible. What Mr. Unz fails to recognize is that there are a lot of students, and he's right about his statistics in terms of which students are here, but the reality is that most of the parents of these students happen to be illiterate themselves in their primary language. So this is a more complex issue than what he's talking about, because we need to get, even though he tries to address it in his proposition for adult training, we're doing that as it goes along in part of our programs. And at the same time, you know, the options do exist for students, contrary to the popular rumor that you know, we force kids into these programs. In Fresno, students can opt out of being in a bilingual
I got to jump in here because we do have to go to a break, and I want to talk about this when we get back. Why can't children be immersed in two languages at the same time? It's working in Miami, so we'll talk about that when we come back. Los Angeles County's population of 9.5 million is now 41% Hispanic. The Hispanic and Asian populations in that county have more than doubled in the past 20 years. Nationwide, about 200 schools in 20 states use two-way bilingual programs.